Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me again, Scott, the person in the Patreon. I am never going to be able to know what to call myself. Hi, I'm the creator of Maximum Apocalypse and Beta Red. I have no idea what to call myself. Hey guys, so it's March still, and so I am going to do an RPG video. For you, an RPG spotlight video. This is the thing that I've been doing. This time, what I'm going to cover, I said I would cover it. People voted for it, so I'm going to cover it. But I'm going to talk today about the World of Darkness and my favorite World of Darkness game. So let's start talking about World of Darkness. Oh, I forgot a piece of paper. Hold on, I had some Wikipedia stuff I printed out for myself. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So the World of Darkness, it was made in 1991. It was started by a guy named Mark Rainhagen, who created the company White Wolf Publishing. They created these games. The game Vampire was essentially like their flagship product, but it was followed quickly by like the original Werewolf the Apocalypse. And basically, it consisted of like 7 core games. It was. Let's see if I can get them all. Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, I think, Wrath the something or other, Changeling, Wrath the Oblivion, that's what it was, Wrath the Oblivion, Changeling the Dreamers, I think was what it was called, and then, let's see, there was the last ones of that particular set it was the first Hunter one, which was called Hunter... Oh, the video game. There was a video game. I played the video game. It's Hunter the Reckoning is what it was called because they made a video game out of it. And then it was Demon the Fallen. I think that was the last one. Because then I think after that it was just a bunch of splat books. Like that was the other products that they made were this bunch of splat books like the Kindred of the East or some other stuff. There was just like a bunch of random splat books that were totally unnecessary. Like they had all the different, like the vampires, Dark Ages vampires, Renaissance, like Victorian era. They had all these other ones that were just kind of like the same game, but like in different eras. But the whole idea, like the history of the game was that it was developed in, I think 1990. Actually, I said 91, but I think 90 was when it started. But it was like really 91 and onward. They were publishing stuff under the name White Wolf. Let's see what I've got from my Wikipedia. All right, so here's the list. So they first designed it was supposed to be 5 games initially. It was Vampire the Masquerade, followed by Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wrath the Oblivion. Yeah, Changeling the Dreamers. Yes! Or Dreaming, sorry, not Dreamers. And it followed this thing called the Storyteller System. So initially, they had intended for you to be able to cross over into the different systems. So if you were playing like a werewolf and you wanted to bring in some vampires from Vampire the Masquerade, you could, or you could make a werewolf character and then play it in a Vampire the Masquerade game. That was sort of the idea. They didn't have like a core set of rules initially. They had the same like rule set in each book, but each book itself stood alone. So you could buy a werewolf book and you'd have all the rules to play werewolf in general, or you could buy a vampire book and play just all the vampire game. Or you play, you got the system from the book as well as the setting stuff, which makes sense. But that's how they initially designed it. The problem was, and this is the time frame that I actually got involved in it, because I started playing. So at its heyday, where White Wolf and the World of Darkness was like the number 2. Wow, I got something in my eye. Number 2 RPG in the world. Like it was D&D, and then it was like World of Darkness. This was in like the early to mid 90s. It was sort of like the perfect time because like grunge and goth stuff was like super popular then, like people in trench coats and stuff, like before like the Columbine thing and kind of after the Columbine thing, like people were like trench coats and like edgy goth people and things like that. So like this game was perfect for them, and so they were people who wanted to not play Dungeons and Dragons and play like fantasy people. They wanted to be edgy goths, like they were, and it was and this was the way to do that. But what made it even better was that like a third party called Mind's Eye Theater took these games and then turned them into a LARP. So then these people who were like edgy goths anyway could just continue to be edgy goths in public and like literally be doing this as quote unquote vampires, and they wouldn't have to change their clothes. So I got involved I was late to the party, as it were. Like this was big in like I said, mid to late 90s. I was not in gaming at the time, as you guys will know, because I was doing games. I played the video game. That's how I knew it existed. I played the video game Hunter the Reckoning, and it was an interesting game, but it was weird. I didn't understand any of what was going on because I did not know the World of Darkness world at all, so the lore wasn't really explained very well in the game. I was just running around smashing stuff with a hammer. collecting magical powers, as it were. But anyway, but like when I became like an adult, so I went to college in 2003. That's when I started. And in January, like early January, when school started up again, so like January like 9th or whatever of 2004, a friend, like over the winter break, I had been introduced to a guy named Matt who lived in my area, who was friends with like my friends. He was like dating one of the girls or something that I knew. Anyway, like I had met all these big gamer people at college, and Matt lived here in Portland, and so like we hung out a little bit during the break, and he was like, hey, you should come to this LARP. And I was like, what is a LARP? And he's like, oh, it's a live action role playing, you need to dress up and be the characters. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, like, you know, because I had been playing Shadowrun, right? So like I didn't know, and I'd like barely been introduced to D&D, so I was like, that seems like a thing that you couldn't pull off. And he's like, no, this game's all political. It's all like, you know, you're trying to like make political agendas and deals with people and stuff like that. It's totally cool. It's fine. And I was like, sure. And so we made the character, and like I read the books, and I was like, oh, this is super cool. But I read the LARP books, like the books for like the actual game. Like we made a character based on the LARPing rules. And so I read like the LARP books, and but I also had like I was making a Ventrue character, and so I had the Ventrue core or supplemental book for the Ventrue clan, because it's one of the vampire clans, and I was like super into it. It was like mobsters and like, you know, business dealers, like shady business dealers and stuff, and I was like, this is cool. And so when we showed up, I didn't have to dress in like edgy goth stuff or like trench coats or anything. I got to wear like a suit because I was a Ventrue, so I got to wear a suit and a tie and like just be dapper, and like, you know, be a man in power. And so like it was an interesting thing, and in a weird way I had no idea what I was doing, and was just kind of like role play. I actually got into situations where I role played myself into a corner, and I was stuck with something that I had like determined my character did or had like been part of, and like it was weird, and I didn't know how to get out of it because technically I shouldn't have been there in the first place. So the storytellers just let me do it. The, you know, people, the moderators, the game masters, they just kind of let me role play myself into a corner. And so I got stuck there, and I had to like deal with the consequences of it. But that was fun. That was actually really fun. But I was like role playing. I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up becoming the prince. Which, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, this game, there's essentially like a hierarchy and power in the vampire world where there's like people that are in charge of an area, and it's like there's like a hierarchy, and it follows the old feudal system. And so I actually became like the highest ranking political official in this LARP. And that's like going to like Ren Fair and becoming the king of the Ren Fair, right? Like it's like a weird thing, because this LARP wasn't a small group. This is at Ashland, Oregon, at the Southern Oregon University, which has basically two major programs. You go there for two things. Anything else you go there for is stupid and you shouldn't go there for them. But you basically go there for the criminology program, because they've got a really great criminology program, which is what I was there for. Or you go there for the theater program, because they have the Oregon Shakespearean Festival is held in Ashland or Medford in that area every summer. And so the people that go to school for theater at Southern Oregon University are basically automatically enrolled in the Oregon Shakespearean Festival as like volunteers. So they get all these cool like hands-on real world experience if they're in the program. Like they don't, I mean, they don't have to, but they basically, you know, it's like, hey, we need everybody we can get. So if you want to be part of it, just be here during the summer. And so everyone that was in the theater program got like full hands-on experience. So this is a great theater program. So at this school, you basically have criminologists and actors. And when you're playing a game where it's like all about like mysteries and murders and stuff, you basically track those two people. So we had a group that was like 40 to 60, depending on the week, LARPers. They were no less than 40, sometimes a little bit more than 60, but 60 was kind of like our max point. Sometimes we were so big that we actually we were doing this in the ballroom at the campus. But we actually had to like expand outside because we had too many people. So we'd have to like expand outside so that we had like more things we could be doing because we needed more space. We had that many people. So to become like the head, that was big. That was big. But I digress. Like basically this game is like a game where you play monsters in the darkness. That's what the World of Darkness is. It's essentially a world of darkness. The idea being that it's like the perfect urban fantasy game, like role-playing game, because the idea is that there's our world, which is like our normal world, and then on top of that normal world there's like this shadowy monster world full of all of the different monsters from all of our myths and legends. There's vampires, there's werewolves, there's ghosts, there's changelings, there's wizards and witches, there's demons. Like it's all there, and it's all just sort of just brewing in the background. and sort of being this game where you play the monsters. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw up. I gotta get out of studio mode. I'm gonna go ahead and throw up some pictures. So this is what the book looked like for second edition. So I was talking about first edition. So from 1991 to 2004, it was basically World of Darkness. This book did not exist. It was these individual books like Vampire or Werewolf, and you just had to like buy them. The problem that you had was that there was a power problem. So I'll go ahead and take that away again because we're not quite there yet. There was like a power problem where if you tried to transfer to one of the other games, the rules in the game, like in your game, a vampire has like powers, but they're weak. Like you're a weak vampire, and then there's other more powerful vampires and stuff, and like they did whatever. But if you try to take that character and transfer them over to another game, that like if you went over to Werewolf, so in Werewolf, like the protagonists of Werewolf games are vampires, and so obviously like the way that the balance for monsters goes, like the CR rating as it were, one vampire can take out like 10 werewolves, right? And so like the werewolves have to team up to try to kill this vampire. Conversely, in Vampire, one werewolf can take down like 10 vampires. So when you try to transfer them, they're created this weird problem where like all of a sudden this vampire who should technically be like mowing down werewolves is actually scared of one werewolf because this werewolf could easily destroy them. And it created this weird power shift problem. So in 2004, with like some declining sales and right after they had a big legal battle with Sony over Underworld, you guys may have remembered that movie. Underworld was essentially a World of Darkness movie. They basically took this. There was a short story that was written for the World of Darkness, and then people who made Underworld basically kind of took that and sort of revamped it and made it like a little bit more Romeo Juliet-esque, but it was basically the same thing. So they got sued. So White Wolf Publishing sued Sony over Underworld, and I'm not sure. What ended up happening when that is a little bit unclear, but I do know that they settled out of court. So Sony admitted to some plagiarism somewhere, which is why the second movie, Underworld 2, looks dramatically different. There's like some weird, confusing continuity errors. It's because of the suing that happened prior to that. So there was a lot of there was this legal battle, and then there was this sales slowdown. And so they decided to reboot the series, and I'll go ahead and post that up. And so they relaunched it with a core book called World of Darkness, and then each of the different games, Vampire the Requiem, Werewolf the Forsaken, Mage the Ascension, the Awakening. The Ascension was the old one. The Awakening. Then there was Promethean. All of the White Wolf games have like a name and then like a tagline after it. So like blank the blank, right? So it was like Promethean the Firstborn or Created or something like that. Changeling the Lost was now the new one, and then Hunter the Vigil. I remember that one because that's the one I'm going to get into in a minute. Then there was Mummy the Cursed and like some other one. There was there wasn't a Wraith one. They for some reason they didn't make a Wraith one. They made something similar. It was called Ghost or something. But anyway, they had actually I bet I could find it on this thing. It was called Mummy Second Edition, Demon the Fallen. So they did make a new demon. It was Wraith the Oblivion. I already covered that one. Man, I should have looked this up earlier. Oh, it's called Geist. There it is, Geist the Sin Eaters. So Geist the Sin Eaters. It was like a different kind of game because they didn't have Wraith. And then there was Beast the Primordial. That was all of them. And so what it was is you bought the core book. You bought this guy, right, the World of Darkness core book, which basically made your human character. And then you had these individual books. It was like the core rules, and then you had these individual books that sort of set the setting for you, and that's how they tried to do this revamp. And it was called World of Darkness, which was not confusing to any of us who were playing World of Darkness, right? We weren't confused at all by this World of Darkness that was now replacing the World of Darkness at all. That wasn't confusing. No, so it was called Classic World of Darkness or Old World of Darkness for the old stuff, and then for the new stuff, it was called New World of Darkness, and that's what we called it. And there was all these different games that came out because of that. There was, like I said, these different versions of the same games: the Vampire the Requiem instead of Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Forsaken versus Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension versus Mage, the Awakening versus Mage the Ascension, and they focused on slightly different things, and they changed the rules just enough that they were slightly different games. So they got rid of Paradox in Mage, so Paradox didn't exist anymore. which was really great because Paradox was kind of like an annoying thing that all of us hated anyway. So they changed it to something else, but then it also focused on the origin story of your mage, like how did you become a mage in the first place, which was basically you were a human being until some World of Darkness thing affected you, but instead of like becoming a hunter, like is basically the backstory for hunters, you realized you could manipulate reality with your mind because you realized that this is all just a construct that everyone just believes in anyway, so you might as well just manipulate it the way that you want, and thus you are a mage. So that was sort of the thing, and so they focused on that origin story stuff. And then after all of that, I think it got sold to a video game company in like 2006. So they took off. That's actually where this book comes from, is because those guys were like, yeah, we got to make a core book. And they wanted to turn it into an MMORPG, hence like the video games and stuff that existed. But what they ended up doing was realizing that wasn't going to work out for them, so they just made like the 20th edition. So every time you see like the 20th anniversary editions, it's from that middle period. They like revamped them to sort of match them, make them smoother. And then though that video game company didn't really know what to do with it, so they didn't really go beyond this thing. But the guys who had created, there was like a whole infighting. Like the original creator decided to leave, and he pieced out. And some other guys kind of created another company called Onyx Path, which is still the ones that make a lot of the White Wolf stuff now. There was like this whole thing, but basically they kind of started to like really sort of, go the way of the dodo, as it were. They just weren't doing so well. So the company sold it off. This video game company sold it off to another video game company called Paradox Interactive. They were a Swedish video game company. They decided to do this. This is what they did. Let me show it to you. Boom. That's not confusing at all, is it? So what they did is they went ahead and said, we're going to make a new version of the World of Darkness, the new World of Darkness, and we're going to call it the old World of Darkness, we're going to call it Classic World of Darkness, and this middle period World of Darkness, we're going to change it to call it Chronicles of Darkness, just to confuse literally everybody. And so it was like a retro name change. They called it Chronicles of Darkness, and they went back to World of Darkness, which is funny because it was World of Darkness before. So the new World of Darkness is now called World of Darkness, and then the old World of Darkness is called Chronicles of Darkness, and the older World of Darkness is called like Old World of Darkness or Classic World of Darkness. But you won't find any books that say old or classic on them. It's not. But you also won't find this book, right? This book that's the same book. You won't find that for old edition because it doesn't exist. It was never made. But then they made it, and that's where our story sort of takes off. There's been a lot of random stuff that's happened to World of Darkness over time. Like I said, there was a legal battle with Sony. They created a bunch of video games, which kind of went, but kind of not. There was a TV series in the 90s, late 90s, called Kindred the Embraced. I have actually watched it. It was terrible. It did not surprise me that it got canceled after 8 episodes. It didn't make it beyond 8 episodes because it was not super great. It was really great if you liked vampire, but it wasn't great if you liked TV shows. And then there was all of the Blank Blank by Nights series. They were like web series and stuff. But they're also like they exist still. But because Blank Blank by Night is essentially the organized play for World of Darkness. So if you really have a place like when I was doing my LARP, we were called Rogue Valley by Night. That was the name of our LARP group. And up here in Portland, it's called Mount Hood by Night. No, it's called it's not Portland by Night. It's something else. It's like Willamette by Night. Yeah, it's called like Willamette by Night. And so so when this new company took over, that's when all of this infighting kind of took a head, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that they decided to just sort of drop like 4th edition. So there's no such thing as 4th editions in the World of Darkness. Everything got to 3rd edition. This new revamp was like, so there was 1st edition, which kind of sucked, and they made a new edition, the 2nd edition, which is what I was playing. And then, because I like in that time when I was doing the LARP, I also started then playing like actual World of Darkness games, so vampire, mage, all of that stuff. But then like the Chronicles of Darkness was essentially 3rd edition, and when then the guys in Onyx Path were trying to make 4th edition, this new Paradox Interactive was like, screw that, skipping that, this is dumb. We're going to make 5th edition. So you will never find a 4th edition of any of the games. You'll find either a 2nd edition, Onyx Path version, which is essentially 4th edition, or you will find 5th edition. Right? There's really no in between. So these guys at Paradox decided they're going to launch V5, as they call it, or Vampire 5th edition, and they want to do that with Vampire or with Werewolf the Apocalypse too. And they were like ready to go with this 5th edition stuff, but unfortunately all of this infighting had created like a really toxic inner network for White Wolf Publishing. And the first version of Vampire, the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, called V5, came out, and it was like way too many references to neo-Nazi groups, pedophiles, like real world gay problems, like gay rights problems. They were all kind of like the backdrop to this world. Like they wanted to make it edgy still, and so they kind of pushed it a little too far, and lots of people criticized it quite a bit, to the point where like they were releasing the Camarilla book, which like had the backdrop of like the actual real life murders of gay people in Georgia, the country of Georgia. Because like it's against the law to be gay in the Russian Federation or something like that. I'm not sure, but it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool the way they handled it. It was labeled as disrespectful to the issues, the actual issues going on. Like disrespectful and crude is basically what the critics all said about it. And so Paradox Interactive disbanded White Wolf Publishing. So you won't find White Wolf Publishing anymore. In fact, what you have to do if you want to find these games is you actually have to go to like Onyx Path to find it. You have to go to Modiphius. Modiphius ended up with Vampire. So Modiphius, the big giant company, is making the Vampire games. Then Onyx Path is making the Chronicles of Darkness stuff still. So all of like the cool stuff, really, like Hunter the Vigil and other things like that. And then Hunter's Entertainment or Renegade Games, they ended up with Werewolf the Apocalypse. And so they're making the 5th edition version of that. And that's where you find it. And nobody's making the LARPs anymore. Like Mind's Eye Theater doesn't really even exist anymore, so like the LARPs will probably never happen. You basically just have to use the old LARP books to play the game. So, real quick, I've gone 20 minutes. This is like the Shadowrun. This is like the problem when I'm like talking about a game system that I've played a lot of, right? This is sort of my deal. But anyway, the pros and cons. So let's talk about pros and cons real fast, and then I'll tell you my favorite. I've actually got a little slide or a little picture. Pros and cons. So pros and cons of World of Darkness. Pros of World of Darkness, it is literally the ultimate urban fantasy RPG system. Almost every urban fantasy book that was basically published from mid-90s onward feels like it could have walked right out of the World of Darkness stuff. Like that's what it feels like. Like all of the so they were inspired. So Interview with the Vampire and all of the Anne Rice stuff came before World of Darkness, and it was like heavily inspired by it. So like Interview with the Vampire and Lestrade and all that, the Queen of the Damned, all that stuff. That led into them making the World of Darkness vampire game, right? And then conversely, like Twilight feels like it could have walked right out of the World of Darkness vampire books, just like vampires who are trying to like not lose their humanity, because humanity is like one of the scales for the World of Darkness. Each of the different games has like a way that you keep yourself from being a full monster, and humanity is the scale for vampires. So like it would be like vampires who were trying to hold on to that humanity. It would just be like the Cullen family. So that's what it feels like. So basically every urban fantasy novel that you've ever read that was made after the mid-90s basically could fit right into the World of Darkness stuff. And so it's the ultimate RPG for playing those kinds of things if you want to play it, which is why some people who love those books play it all the time still. The cons of World of Darkness, the problems with it is like there's like 4 that I wrote down. I wrote some notes. First is that it still tries to be edgy, despite the fact that it still kind of relies on the trench coat goth grunge scene of the early 90s. It hasn't aged very well, in my opinion. Every person I've met that still plays World of Darkness, even the newer Worlds of Darkness, is still kind of like they're still kind of holding on to an aesthetic that doesn't really exist anymore. Like it's not the same as like the cyberpunk aesthetic, because cyberpunk aesthetic still exists. We still have this sort of man-machine clash. This is like literally the genre just doesn't exist anymore. People just don't walk around in trench coats anymore like they do. Like the goth scene is really, really small now though. Like it's not big anymore. It's not like a huge thing. So it sort of holds on to those guys and it's trying to cling, which is why it like reached out a little bit and reached a little too far for V5 and made people feel uncomfortable. The system also relies very heavily on there always being a bigger, badder, scarier political entity that's in charge, and you therefore have to like do what they say because they govern the monsters. And that to me there's one thing to have like mysteries and darkness and monsters and you know, Call of Cthulhu type stuff. But it's another thing when like it's sort of forced upon you that you have to follow certain rules, because otherwise you get destroyed by someone who's become the prince of a town, even though they have no friggin' clue what they're doing. And they become prince and immediately order a blood hunt that kills off a few players or a few characters, because that's what they did, because that's how it works. It kind of it got boring to me after a while, because each time we'd play a new whatever mage, vampire, werewolf, whatever, there was always like some political party that was basically telling me what to do, and I didn't really have a choice as a player to like determine what my character wanted to do, because as soon as I tried to step out of line, the game master, storyteller, moderator would be like, "The prince comes to you and says, you directly defile my laws," right? And it was like kind of a boring and annoying. And so that's one thing about them that doesn't really strike me as much as horror, because it always sort of relies on that. Like, that's what you're most afraid of, is like this high political authority, which is not quite a horror game, really. And then the other thing is it really relies heavily on secrets and keeping secrets and not sharing them at all, which is fine in some aspects, but not super conducive for role-playing when you're like not really supposed to share information with other players, even if you're part of the same cabal, like you're working together to like achieve a goal. You like, secrets are like the core of the game, and like sharing them is like a major thing, and like getting people to like hold your secrets is like a huge deal. So it's not super great for that. But it does rely very heavily on role-playing. It's a very heavily role-playing system, so I guess that's a pro of it. But the con to that is that it then has a really weak combat system. It doesn't really want you to fight. Like, Call of Cthulhu has like a pretty deadly combat system, right? But you could still fight if you wanted to. In World of Darkness, you can fight, but it doesn't work out very well. Like, you'll do like 3 damage to a vampire or something, and the vampire it just goes, "Oh, well, I have this special power that makes it so that I don't take, like, you have to hit me with at least 5 damage for me to care," like that kind of thing. Or you're like a mage and you just snap your fingers and blow people out of the sky. It's not really conducive for like interactive combat, because you can use combat for like storytelling, but it doesn't really have that very well, unless you're playing Hunter the Vigil. If you've watched my videos so far, if you watch it all the way to here, great. Now you get to see my favorite. I appreciate you, and you get to see my favorite version of the World of Darkness. World of Darkness has a game called Hunter the Vigil. It's basically a better Supernatural RPG than the Supernatural RPG. And by that I mean Supernatural, the TV show. This is basically it's that in an RPG. But it's better than the Supernatural RPG that exists. Basically, you play as a human. You are not a monster in the World of Darkness. You are a human, and you have you've been exposed to the World of Darkness. You know it exists, and much like the John Stakely book that I mentioned earlier in the month, you can't not do anything about it. Like, you know that they exist now. You know that when people go missing, it's probably something related to the World of Darkness. You have this other understanding about what's going on in the shadows that you can't not deal with it. So you're a hunter that's been exposed to those things, and you've decided that you're going to fight back. You're not just going to crawl into your little bed and like cry yourself to sleep. Like, you're going to get out there and do something about it. There's no real bigger, badder, scarier political entity. There's just those monsters that live in the darkness: the werewolves, the wraiths, the vampires, the changelings, the primordials, the whatevers. Like, it's just big scary stuff. The other thing is that Hunter has a much better system for combat than a lot of the other World of Darkness games, and it has something called tactics, where your team works together to do that special damage. Like, you like I said before, like a vampire is like, "Oh, well, you have to do at least 5 damage to do any damage to me." Great. We players, when we get together and do this teamwork thing called like, run and gun or some other like tagline, it's always got like a name like that. We all try to get our successes, and if we get the number that we want, we do 10 damage. Wow, paying attention now, vampire? So it's actually like, it does this cool thing where it sets the players up as a team to work together in combat to like achieve damage goals to beat these monsters. And so and the thing that you do isn't just like, we made these rolls and we did it. No, it's like a whole setup. Like, the way that the team that particular thing goes is like something like one person literally runs up to the monster and goes, "Boo, boo, 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 boo," and so the monster looks at them and then drops to the ground while the others unload wet guns on them, or other things like that. I remember one we had, because I had a driver character. The character would drive his truck super fast down the road, and they would like let the monster chase them out into the road, and then I would run them down with the truck, and we just had to get like 7 successes or something to pull that off. And then we did like a massive amount of damage because I ran him over with my truck. It was cool. And so it creates a cooler system for combat than in a lot of the other games. And it has like this whole investigatory element, because you have to find the monster first. You can't just, willy-nilly kill people. Like, this is a world, you're a human. You can't just kill the CEO of some company. You have to make sure that he is in fact a Ventrue and not just a thrall of the Ventru. And if he's a thrall of the Ventru, like, then you've got to find the Ventru. Like, you got to find the vampire and take them and figure out where they are, and then you can try your tactic and stuff like that. So it's got this really big investigatory side to the game. So you do like a lot of investigation, a lot of testing and prodding to make sure that you've got the right target, and then you take the target down and hope that as you're taking them down, like, their superpowers expose themselves, so you know that you've actually found the monster. Otherwise, you murder somebody, and then you have to deal with the consequences of potentially having murdered a normal person, like jail time or, you know, the damage to your psyche. So it basically allows you to play like 3 kinds of games. Like, there's like big government conspiracy cover-up stuff where like they know the World of Darkness exists, but they don't want everyone else to know about it, and you're helping sort of cover that up. Think like Delta Green or like SCP, where you're containing and like sort of making sure no one knows that there's these monsters out there. Or it has like a mission-to-mission sort of episodal thing with like maybe an overarching plot, but maybe not. But you definitely have support. Like, so you like each time you meet up, you're like a Mission Impossible. It's like, Mr. Jones, in the city there's a blah, 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 and you like play that, and you can do that kind of game with Hunter the Vigil, and where you're like, okay, each time we meet, we're gonna be trying to investigate something and then kill the monster. Or, and this is my favorite version of it, is to like, you can play like in the trenches kind of stuff, where you're like, nobody, you don't really, the group, the hunters don't have a whole lot of support network, if they have any at all, and if they do, it's probably old books from other hunters who have died. And then they've got to like solve the mysteries and find the truth out, very Call of Cthulhu-esque, like slowly go down the path of scary, terrifying stuff, and then figure out what's at the end of it, and then hopefully live through it. If you have played Call of Cthulhu, this type of game sort of lends itself to being able to pull from that slow burn psychological horror stuff. So Hunter, to me, does really well with that because there's a synergy there. But on the flip side, like the Hunter the Vigil has a much more developed character progression system, like character development, making it like leveling up, as it were, than Call of Cthulhu, which is really kind of like one-shot oriented. So the Hunter stuff can allow you to play through like a campaign of like this sort of thing. And so there's a synergy there between the Call of Cthulhu world, which I love very much, and the Hunter the Vigil world. And I actually had been playing Hunter the Vigil like before I ever really started playing Call of Cthulhu. So I didn't realize the synergy was there until I started playing Call of Cthulhu, and I was like, oh man, this is great. Like, there's a definite synergy here. So it's my favorite of the World of Darkness games. We are at the second longest video I've ever made, because Shadowrun was much longer. But that's it. That's everything I've got. So World of Darkness is a cool system. I give it a couple of thumbs ups, as it were, for its ability to play out urban fantasy and to, like, you know, be monsters in the darkness, as it were. But you can play out some of the cool stuff there and not have to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's like the antithesis of Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, there used to be con wars where people would dress up, like they would LARP like World of Darkness stuff, and then like at like Dragon Con or like Gary Con or like Gen Con, and they would like invade the D&D LARPer territories, or like the pre-made castles and stuff that are outside. They would like invade them, and they would like use like Nerf guns and stuff and fight them. It was like a thing that was going on back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. But it's like this great antithesis to Dungeons and Dragons. It's like a cool like darknessy type stuff. But it's not. It's kind of aged badly, so you have to sort of pick and choose which games you're gonna play. The Onyx Path has created some new ones, like they've got like Ghost Hunter. They've got the new edition of Hunter the Vigil, the second edition, and they've got like Ghost Hunters and stuff like that. So there are ways to play in the World of Darkness that doesn't necessarily embrace the like monster side of it, like, but the other side where you're dealing with the monsters. So I give it thumbs up. You know, Mage is fun. Vampire was fun back in the day. I'm not sure that I would say it's fun now. Hunter the Vigil is super fun, and so I give it thumbs up. But I would recommend like playing it with the right kind of group. If you're playing it with the wrong kind of group, it does tend to go pretty badly, because it is very roleplay oriented. So there's a lot of like, if you have like a person who's like a power gamer who like is silent until combat breaks out, they are not going to be contributing to your game like at all. So be aware of that. Otherwise, that's it. Thanks for watching my second longest video ever made. And again, it's an RPG review video. Like I said, I think it's just because I'm passionate about the particular subject. And this one covered I actually covered like 12 games right here in this one video. So that's it. I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching if you watched all the way through. Otherwise, have a good day, and I hope you have good gaming.